everyone, welcome to my YouTube channel. In this tutorial we are going to be crocheting this super cute romper or onesie. Please see the drop down description box for links to the pattern and additional information. Now let's get started. For materials, I am using 176 yards of worsted weight cotton yarn, an H 5.00mm crochet hook, a pair of scissors, some stitch markers just in case, and a yarn needle for weaving in ends. You will also need 2 buttons. These are a little bit too small, but I'm going to make it work. To begin, create a slip knot of your choice and chain 10. After we have chained 10, we can begin row 1. Begin this row by placing a single crochet V-stitch into the second chain from hook. Single crochet, chain 1, single crochet into the same stitch. That is our first single crochet V-stitch. Then skip 1 chain and V-stitch into the following stitch. Continue in this fashion all the way down your chain. Here's my work at the end of row 1, and I have 5 V-stitches. Chain 1 and turn to begin row 2. Row 2, we're going to be placing 2 buttonholes, and that's areas where we're just going to be chaining. The first thing you want to do is place a V-stitch into your first V-stitch. Now I find these single crochet V-stitches a little bit hard to distinguish, so I'm going to take my hook out and just show you what I've found is the easiest way to place your next stitch. So here we have a V-stitch right here. We have a single crochet, chain 1, and single crochet. So right there where it's creating this V and this knot, this is where we want to place our next stitch. So of course this is my first V-stitch on this side. So right where that knot is where I'm going to be placing my hook. V-stitch into your first V-stitch. Next, we're going to make some buttonholes. So chain 1, skip the next V-stitch and V-stitch into the following V-stitch. And do that again. Chain 1, skip the next V-stitch and V-stitch into your last V-stitch. Row 3, chain 1 and turn. For row 3, we're going to single crochet into this first single crochet here, then V-stitch into the V-stitch, V-stitch into your chain 1 spaces and into this V-stitch, V-stitch again, then V-stitch into your last V-stitch and single crochet into your last single crochet. So there's my single crochet, and now placing a V-stitch. Then V-stitch into your chain 1, V-stitch into this V-stitch, V-stitch into this chain 1, V-stitch into your last V-stitch, and don't forget to single crochet into the very last single crochet. At the end of this row, I will meet back up. Here's my work at the end of row 3. Row 4, chain 1, and turn. Now this last row that we just did, we have 5 V-stitches and 2 single crochets, 1 on each side. So that was row 3. Now for row 4, we're going to be placing a V-stitch into our single crochets, 1 on each side here, and then also a V-stitch in each V-stitch across. So we should have 7 V-stitches for this row. At the end of this row, I will show you how my work is looking. Here's my work at the end of row 4. Here I have chained 1 and turned. For rows 5 and 6, you are just going to place 1 V-stitch into each one of your previous V-stitches. So of course we currently have 7 V-stitches. I will meet back up for row 7. Here is my work after row 5 and 6. Now rows 7 through 14 is going to be a repeat of row 3 through 6 twice. Here is my work after row 14. Rows 15 and 16, just place one V-stitch into each of your 11 V-stitches for both rows. For row 17, I will meet back up. Here is my work after row 16. Rows 17 and 18 are going to be repeating rows 3 and 4 again for an increase. So we're going to be going from 11 V-stitches up to 13 V-stitches. Here is my work after row 18. Now for the next 17 rows, we're just going to be placing one V-stitch into each one of our 13 V-stitches. And after all 17 rows are complete, we will continue with the tutorial. Here is how my work looks after I've crocheted those 17 rows. And I just put this little stitch marker here, so I have the 17 rows right here. The next thing we want to do with the onesie is create some armholes. So they're going to just go right in here like this. For row 1 of the armholes, we're going to skip this first V-stitch and the last V-stitch and just have 11 V-stitches in between. So slip stitch into your first V-stitch, chain 1, and V-stitch into each of your next 11 V-stitches. Remember, we're going to skip this very one at the end. So from here, you're just going to turn to begin row 2. For row 2, V-stitch into each one of your 11 V-stitches. Here's how my work looks after row 2. Turn to begin row 3 and chain 1. Row 3 starts off with a beginning V-stitch 2 together. So these 2 stitches are going to become 1, and then we're going to V-stitch in each V-stitch across and V-stitch these last 2 V-stitches together. For a beginning V-stitch 2 together, we're going to single crochet 2 together into these 2 V-stitches here. So insert your hook into your first V-stitch, grab your yarn and pull up a loop. We have 2 loops on our hook. Insert your hook into the second V-stitch, grab your yarn and pull up a loop. We now have 3 loops on our hook. Yarn over and pull through all 3 loops for single crochet 2 together. Then chain 1 and single crochet again into this V-stitch here. So then we have beginning V-stitched 2 together. Now V-stitch in each V-stitch across until you get to these 2 V-stitches. Then I will meet back up and we can do the same thing as we did here and do a decrease. So here I am at the end of the row and we are going to end V-stitch 2 together. So single crochet into this second from last V-stitch, chain 1, and now we're going to single crochet 2 together starting here and ending here. So insert your hook into this V-stitch here, grab your yarn and pull up a loop, insert your hook into the last V-stitch, grab your yarn and pull up a loop. There are our 3 loops, then yarn over and pull through all 3 loops. From here you can turn to begin the next row. For rows 4 through 9, just V-stitch into each one of your 9 V-stitches, and then once row 9 is complete, I will meet back up with you. Here is my work after row 9. Turn to begin first shoulder neck. For row 1, chain 1, and we're going to V-stitch into these first 3 V-stitches. After you have done those 3 V-stitches, slip stitch into your next V-stitch, and you're going to leave the remaining stitches unworked. Turn to begin row 2. Row 2, we're going to beginning V-stitch 2 together, these 2 V-stitches, and then V-stitch into our last stitch. So doing the single crochet 2 together into the first 2 stitches, then chain 1 and single crochet into the same stitch in that second stitch. That's the beginning V-stitch 2 together. Then just V-stitch into your remaining stitch to finish the row. Turn to begin row 3. Row 3, chain 1, and V-stitch into these 2 V-stitches, 1 into each stitch. Turn to begin row 4. Row 4, we're going to beginning V-stitch 2 together, these last 2 stitches here. So of course a single crochet 2 together into your 2 stitches like this, chain 1, and then single crochet again into that last stitch. Now I have turned for row 5, and you just want to chain 1 and then you're going to single crochet 2 together is what they want us to do. So we're going to go into this last single crochet here and then skip the chain 1 and single crochet into the last stitch here. So we're single crocheting those 2 together. So I'm inserting my hook into the first single crochet, inserting my hook into the second single crochet. I skipped that chain 1 and then just single crocheting 2 together. So that was row 5. Now you can fasten off and we can go on to the second shoulder and neck. Now here I have just finished that first shoulder and neck, and what we want to do is make the second one here. So we're going to start over on this side, so we need to flip our work, or I need to flip my work like this. So I'm looking at it like this, because we're going to join our yarn here and work over and then back and forth like that. Now you can join your yarn however you feel most comfortable doing that. Here I have just created a slip knot, and you're going to single crochet into this first V-stitch right here on the armhole. Now I'm creating my first single crochet and then chain 1 and single crochet into the same space for my first V-stitch. Then V-stitch into your next 2 V-stitches, and then into this third V-stitch, go ahead and slip stitch. Now we're just repeating what we did for the last shoulder and neck. So I have 1, 2, 3 V-stitches and slip stitched into my next V-stitch for row 1. Turn to begin row 2. Row 2, beginning V-stitch these first 2 stitches together, and then V-stitch into your last stitch. Now we have 2 V-stitches, so turn to begin row 3. Row 3, chain 1 and place 1 V-stitch into each one of your 2 V-stitches. Turn to begin row 4. Row 4, chain 1 and beginning V-stitch these 2 V-stitches together. So now I'm down to 1 V-stitch. Here we are on row 5 again, so just chain 1 and you're going to single crochet 2 together, 1 single crochet from this last stitch, and then 1 single crochet here, skipping that chain 1. Now the pattern says not to fasten off, but I don't have another roll of yarn, so what I'm going to do is fasten off and then we'll just deal with the consequences afterwards. But if you do have another yarn you can start the next side with, go ahead and start that, and then I guess just leave that attached. So now here is how my work looks after finishing the first and second shoulder and neck. The next thing we're going to do is do a contrast band. You don't have to do this. You can work in the same color as your base color if you'd like, but I'm just going to run a row of single crochet along here. Again, attach your yarn however you feel most comfortable. If you were going with that same color as the base yarn, I guess you wouldn't have had to fasten off like I did. So the pattern says to chain 1, I just did that, and then working in ends of rows, single crochet evenly spaced all along the neck edge. So that's what I'm going to do here, just neatly single crocheting all along the neck edge. Once this is all finished, I will meet back up and show you how it looks. So after that single crochet row is all finished, this is how my work looks. Now the back of my onesie is all finished, so now I can begin the front. Now we can begin the front of our onesie. So go ahead and make a slip knot and chain 6. After chaining 6, you want to V-stitch into your second chain from hook. Then skip 1 chain and repeat. So on this row we have 3 V-stitches. V-stitch, skip 1 chain, and V-stitch. For row 2, you're going to chain 1 and V-stitch into each one of your 3 V-stitches. For row 3, chain 1, and we're going to single crochet into this first single crochet and single crochet into the last single crochet. Turn to begin row 4. Row 4, we're going to be increasing, so from 3 stitches to 5 V-stitches. You're going to chain 1 and place your first V-stitch into this first single crochet here, then a V-stitch into each one of your V-stitches, and then V-stitch into your last single crochet here. At the end of row 4, you should have 5 V-stitches. Here is the end of row 4. And row 5, turn and place 1 V-stitch into each one of your 5 V-stitches. I will meet back up for row 6. Now rows 6 through 11, we're going to repeat rows 3 and 4. So here's my work after row 11, and I also have 11 V-stitches. Now we can begin row 12. Row 12, you're just going to chain 1 and turn, place 1 V-stitch into each one of your 11 V-stitches. For rows 13 and 14, we're again going to repeat row 3 and 4. So we're going to go from 11 V-stitches to 13 V-stitches. Now this is what my work looks like after row 14. And I have 13 V-stitches. From here, we're just going to place 1 V-stitch into each one of our 13 V-stitches for 17 rows, just like we did for the back of the onesie. After those 17 rows are complete, I will meet back up and we can continue. Here is my work after those 17 rows are complete. If you take the back and that new piece that you just made, which is the front, and line it up with the armholes here, this is how the work looks. Now we can begin the armholes. Now for the armholes on the front side, we are going to repeat the armholes row 1 through 3 like we did for the back. Row 1, you're going to slip stitch into your first V-stitch here, then chain 1 and V-stitch in each V-stitch across, leaving this last V-stitch unworked. Then you'll turn to begin row 2. After row 1 of armholes, you should have 11 V-stitches. Row 2 of armholes, place 1 V-stitch in each V-stitch across. For row 3 of armholes, we're going to be beginning a V-stitch these two. So of course, to beginning V-stitch 2 together, you're going to chain 1 and single crochet 2 together, starting in your first V-stitch and ending in your second V-stitch. Chain 1 and V-stitch into that second V-stitch again. Then V-stitch in each V-stitch across, and once we get to these last 2 stitches, I will meet back up and we can end V-stitch 2 together. Again, to end V-stitch 2 together, you're going to single crochet, chain 1 into the second V-stitch from the end. Then you're going to single crochet these 2 stitches together. So you're going to start into this stitch here and end into this end V-stitch here. Now turn to begin the next row. Rows 4 through 6, just place 1 V-stitch into each one of your 9 V-stitches, and I will meet back up again for the next step. After row 6, this is how my work looks. Turn to begin first shoulder and neck. Chain 1 and V-stitch into your first 3 V-stitches, and then slip stitch into your next V-stitch. After that's finished, turn to begin row 2. Row 2, chain 1, slip stitch into your first V-stitch, V-stitch into each one of your remaining V-stitches, and then you can fasten off. For the second shoulder and neck on the front side, you're going to start from this side here, and we're going to do the exact same thing that we did for this side. So go ahead and fasten your yarn with a single crochet to your first V-stitch here. Then you're going to do a V-stitch into your first 3 V-stitches and slip stitch into the next V-stitch. After that's done, turn to begin row 2. Row 2, chain 1, slip stitch into your first V-stitch and V-stitch into the remaining 2 V-stitches. After you've completed your last 2 V-stitches, go ahead and fasten off. Again, here the pattern says not to fasten off, but I find it's just easier for me to work with one skein of yarn if I fasten off. So this is how the front side looks after the shoulder and neck is complete. From here, we're going to do another contrast band and just single crochet evenly across the top here. When I'm all finished, this is what that looks like. For assembly of the onesie, what you want to do is place your 2 pieces together with right sides facing. So the wrong sides are going to be out, and I've chosen my right side versus wrong side by just the single crochet on the band. After you have sewn up both sides of your work, go ahead and turn your work right side out. The next thing we want to do is tack down these shoulders here. So I find that if you take this shoulder and you go all the way down like this, your neck area or head area won't be large enough. So what you want to do is just take that shoulder and kind of overlap this row with this last row here. So it looks just like that. And then this hole for the head is going to be large enough. So you just want to basically just tack it down right on this side with your yarn needle and just do a couple simple stitches to hold that in place. After I have tacked down the shoulders, this is how my work looks. And as you see, I just put those stitches on the very outside, so this collar area is still a little bit open and it just gives a little bit more space there. From here, we can go ahead and create the sleeves. But first, I'm going to go ahead and weave in some of these ends just because I've got a lot going on. Now we can create the sleeves. So this is the second onesie that I've done with this pattern, and for some reason, the first row of each sleeve, you're supposed to place 8 V-stitches around this opening for row 1. Now I find that 8 V-stitches in this opening is just not enough. So I move up to the next size, and that would be 10 V-stitches around this opening, and then for the remainder of the sleeve I just follow that next size up. Of course, you can go ahead and follow the pattern and just put 8 around if you can make it. I find that there are large gaps and I just don't care for that look. So again, I'm going to place 10 V-stitches for round 1 of my sleeve. So here is round 1 of the sleeve complete, and as you see, even with the 10 V-stitches, there are some openings like this. But like I said, they're not nearly as bad as if you just had 8 stitches. At the end of round 1, just go ahead and slip stitch into your first single crochet. For rounds 2 and 3, chain 1 and V-stitch into each one of your 10 V-stitches, and then I will meet back up for round 4. After row 3 is complete, this is how my work looks. Round 4, we're going to be decreasing from 10 V-stitches down to 7 V-stitches. So the repeat for this row is going to be V-stitch 2 together, then V-stitch 2. So of course we're going to be beginning V-stitch into these first 2 V-stitches. And I'm also going to place a stitch marker into this first V-stitch here just because it's a little bit hard to see when you're coming back around. Then 1 V-stitch in each of your next 2 V-stitches. Then V-stitch 2 together, I'm going to just do a single crochet 2 together into these 2 V-stitches, then chain 1 and V-stitch. And then you're just going to repeat this around. So the next 2 V-stitches, 1 V-stitch in each V-stitch, and then these last 2 V-stitches, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to V-stitch 2 together. So I just single crocheted 2 together, chained 1 and single crocheted into the last stitch. Then slip stitch to your first single crochet here. At the end of row 4, you should have 7 V-stitches. Row 5, chain 1 and V-stitch into each one of your 7 V-stitches. Here is row 5 complete for me. Now row 6 is another point in the pattern that it's just not working out for me, but you can go ahead and follow the instructions if you like. Row 6 and row 7, there are 14 single crochet currently on the sleeve. I'm going to single crochet into each one of my single crochets, skipping those chain 1 spaces for row 6. And then for row 7, I'm going to switch over to the pink, and I'm going to do 14 single crochet in the pink. After that's all finished, I'm going to fasten off and show you how it looks. Here's my work after row 6 and row 7. Complete a second sleeve just how you did the first, and then we can meet back up for some finishing details. After finishing both of the sleeves, go ahead and grab your alternative color if you are using one and single crochet all the way around the bottom edge here. After that, you can sew on your 2 little buttons. A little quick tip when doing the edging, I like to place 2 single crochet into the corners to help round the corner. Here's my little romper or onesie all finished. Thank you so much for watching this tutorial. Please check out the description box below, that's in the drop down, for additional information including links to the yarn I used and the pattern. Make sure to leave a comment in the comment section, share this tutorial with your friends, hit that like button if you liked it, and of course subscribe if you haven't. Have a lovely crochet day, and I hope to see you again in my next tutorial. Bye!